The biting wind howled, a relentless sculptor of the landscape, stripping trees bare and chilling the very earth. For the medieval peasant, winter was not merely a season, it was an annual siege, a profound test of endurance against cold, hunger, and darkness. Their homes, far from sanctuaries of comfort, were crude fortifications, earthen vessels designed to trap the fleeting warmth of life itself. These were not the lofty stone castles of the powerful but humble dwellings, fashioned from the most basic elements of their world: earth, wood, and straw. Every crack, every crevice, was a potential breach in their fragile defense. Survival hinged on ingenuity, communal spirit, and a deep, visceral understanding of the natural world. Every beam was hewn by hand, every wall painstakingly raised, embodying an almost spiritual connection to the very materials around them. This immense labor ensured that even the simplest shelter was a monument to perseverance, built against overwhelming odds. Watch until the end and you'll discover the true cost, measured in sweat, pain, and lives, behind the simple act of building a roof over one's head in medieval England. Watch until the end and you'll discover the true cost, measured in sweat, pain, and lives, behind the simple act of building a roof over one's head in medieval England. A peasant, his hands calloused and his back perpetually aching from generations of toil, understood the land not merely as a field to be tilled for sustenance, but as an indispensable ally in the ceaseless fight against winter's profound chill. Their dwelling was often more than just a structure built on the earth's surface. It was frequently and quite intentionally built into it. This represented a form of geomantic architecture, an intuitive, unwritten understanding of thermal mass and the strategic advantages of windbreaks. Many humble crofts and elongated longhouses were partially dug into the ground, often intelligently utilizing a natural slope, a pre-existing depression in the terrain, or even the remnants of older, more decayed structures from previous settlements. This subterranean element was not merely chosen for its ease of construction or the readily available earth, which was certainly a benefit. It was a deliberate and profoundly vital thermal strategy, an engineering marvel born of necessity. The surrounding earth, with its immense thermal mass, its inherent capacity to absorb, store, and radiate heat over extended periods, acted as a natural, pervasive insulator, a constant thermal buffer. It absorbed the meager warmth of the sun during the fleeting daylight hours, even on overcast winter days, and then slowly, consistently released that stored heat back into the dwelling throughout the freezing, endless nights, much like a slow-release heater. This earthen embrace significantly stabilized the interior temperature, effectively blunting the sharpest, most piercing edges of the external cold, preventing rapid temperature fluctuations that would otherwise demand constant fuel consumption. The very earth beneath their feet, far from being just a utilitarian floor, was an integral, active component of their heating system, a silent yet powerful guardian against the relentless, encroaching frost, providing a steady baseline warmth that made life indoors tolerable. Furthermore, the precise placement of the dwelling within the landscape was rarely arbitrary or coincidental, but rather the result of generations of observational knowledge. These seasoned inhabitants instinctively sought out locations naturally sheltered from the prevailing, bone-chilling winds, perhaps nestled snugly behind a slight, protective hillock that broke the wind's force, deeply ensconced within a dense copse of trees whose branches acted as a natural windbreak, or even meticulously oriented to present its least exposed, most robust wall, often built from thicker earth or stone, directly to the harshest, most cutting winter gales. The subtle nuances of the microclimate, often imperceptible to a modern observer, were keenly felt and exploited by the medieval peasant. The very contours of the natural landscape, the subtle undulations and protective features, became their silent, powerful allies in a desperate annual struggle for survival against the elements. This intimate, intuitive relationship with the land, this almost spiritual leveraging of natural forces and inherent properties, was a non-obvious yet absolutely fundamental aspect of their complex winter survival strategy, extending far beyond the mere collection of firewood. It reflected a deep, practical wisdom meticulously passed down through countless generations, often through oral tradition and practical demonstration, born directly from the countless cold nights endured and the unforgiving, brutal lessons relentlessly taught by nature itself. The earth was not merely a passive foundation upon which their lives rested. It was a living, breathing, responsive component of their essential shelter, actively participating in their daily existence and shaping their methods of building and living. Very curious to know your thoughts on this. What do you think about the idea of integrating dwellings with the earth itself for insulation? And how might that compare to modern passive house designs? Let us know in the comments below. The walls of the peasant's home, humble as they appeared, were a profound testament to laborious craftsmanship and communal effort, constructed primarily from the ancient and ubiquitous technique of Wattle and Daub. This time-honored building method commenced with the painstaking weaving of flexible branches, most commonly harvested hazel or willow, into a robust and intricate latticework framework. This wattle formed the skeletal structure of the wall, providing its initial stability and shape. This intricate framework was then meticulously, layer by laborious layer, plastered with daub. The daub itself was a potent, organic mixture, typically composed of readily available local clay, fine sand added for grit and durability, ample reinforcing straw for tensile strength and insulation, and often, critically, animal dung, which acted as a natural binder, further enhancing its fibrous cohesion and adding to its insulating properties. Once this composite mixture thoroughly dried and hardened under the influence of sun and wind, it formed a surprisingly effective, albeit inherently permeable, barrier against the biting winds and dampness that characterized medieval winters. It was not, however, truly airtight by any modern standard. The ceaseless, insidious wind, a constant, chilling presence that underscored the harshness of their environment, relentlessly sought out every minute crack and subtle crevice within the dried and inevitably shrinking daub. These imperfections created persistent, frigid drafts that snaked insidiously through the dwelling like unseen serpents, touching bare skin and chilling bones. These cold currents were not just discomforting, they were constant, pervasive reminders of winter's relentless, unyielding assault. Yet paradoxically, the very slight porosity of the wattle and daub allowed a crucial, if entirely unintended, form of ventilation. This breathing quality, while seemingly a fundamental flaw in terms of thermal efficiency, was in fact a complex, double-edged sword. On one hand, it necessitated a constant, draining battle against the penetrating cold, with insidious drafts endlessly infiltrating the interior space. On the other hand, and vitally, it also allowed a significant portion of the thick, acrid smoke from the central hearth to slowly filter out, preventing a catastrophic and lethal buildup of noxious fumes within the confined space. It represented a fundamental compromise born directly from the severe limitations of their available materials and technological capabilities. A truly sealed, airtight structure was simply beyond their means and knowledge. Thus, they instinctively managed the inherent permeability as best they could, understanding its dual nature. The hard-won warmth generated within was perpetually held in a precarious, delicate balance with the constant ingress of cold air, relentlessly forcing the inhabitants to huddle ever closer to the central fire for survival. How did they manage to prevent their homes from being completely consumed by the smoke and the very flame that kept them alive, without the benefit of a modern chimney? To truly comprehend the profound reality of the medieval peasants' winter sleep, one must attempt to immerse themselves fully in the rich, unfiltered sensory tapestry of their nights. A world utterly alien to our modern, insulated existence, where the senses of hearing and smell played an acute, almost hyper-vigilant, vital role in their nocturnal experience. The sounds of the night were raw, immediate, and utterly unfiltered by double-glazed windows or soundproofing. Outside their fragile wattle and daub shell, the relentless howl of the wind was not just an atmospheric sound, but a constant physical presence, rattling the very structure of their humble home, causing the straw in the thatch to shiver and serving as a chilling, persistent reminder of the cold's pervasive reach and omnipresent threat. This external symphony of nature's fury seamlessly merged with the interior soundscape. The comforting, yet insistent crackling and spitting of the central fire provided a constant, rhythmic backdrop, punctuated by the soft, rhythmic rustling of straw as family members shifted restlessly in their sleep, or the unsettling, sudden scuttling of unseen pests, rodents or insects, in the thatch overhead or burrowing within the walls. But perhaps the most distinct and pervasive auditory layer was added by their animal companions. Livestock, often a family's most valuable asset, were frequently brought indoors for their precious, radiating warmth, thus introducing their own unique nocturnal orchestra. One might hear the soft, steady breathing of placid cattle, the occasional deep grunt of a sleeping pig, or the gentle, rhythmic bleating of a sheep. These sounds, along with the shifting of straw as animals settled, created a continuous, low hum of biological activity. This constant, organic cacophony of life, ranging from human snores and murmurs to the diverse sounds of their animals, would be utterly unimaginable to modern sleepers accustomed to quiet bedrooms. Yet it was the utterly normal, expected, and even reassuring soundtrack to their nightly survival. It was a testament to the seamless integration of human and animal life, a necessity that drowned out other less welcome sounds and provided a feeling of shared existence. Equally pervasive and distinct were the complex scents that continuously wove through the very fabric of the air within the dwelling. The dominant aroma was, without a doubt, smoke, a thick, acrid, wood-tinged presence that permeated every fiber of their coarse clothing, every strand of hair, and the very air they breathed with every labored inhalation. This pungent, ever-present cloud mingled seamlessly with the earthy, damp aroma of the soil floor underfoot, the musty, organic scent of straw bedding, and the raw, unwashed animal hides used for warmth, and the undeniable, strong presence of human and animal effluvia, a stark and unavoidable reality in a pre-sanitation age where waste management was rudimentary at best. The subtle pungency of animal urine and feces, though regularly cleared, would inevitably linger in the air. Even the faint aroma of meager cooking, the lingering remnants from the day's frugal meals, perhaps the scent of boiling pottage or baking bread, would hover heavily in the stagnant air, becoming an integral part of the dwelling's pervasive and recognizable signature. These were, by any modern standard, not pleasant odors. Indeed, they would be considered overpowering, stifling, and unhygienic. Yet for the medieval peasant, these were the unmistakable visceral smells of life, of continuous, tenacious survival, of a home, however humble, crude, or malodorous. The very air itself became a dense, complex tapestry, woven from these natural, animal, and undeniably human odors, serving as a constant, visceral reminder of their intimate, inseparable connection to their immediate environment and their fundamental, often harsh, bodily existence. This acute, constant sensory immersion, far from being a mere passive backdrop, profoundly shaped their sleep patterns, their perception of time, and their very intimate experience of the long, dark medieval night, making every breath a testament to their existence. The true, undeniable heart of the medieval peasant's home, the very pulse of its meager survival through the unforgiving winter, was the central hearth. This fundamental element was a stark contrast to the more sophisticated, smoke-channeling chimneys that would become common in later eras, efficiently drawing fumes upwards and out. For the vast majority of peasant dwellings, the medieval hearth was often nothing more elaborate than a shallow depression, a simple concavity dug directly into the packed earth floor at the approximate center of the dwelling. Here, a small, carefully tended, and meticulously managed fire was kept perpetually burning, a flickering beacon of warmth and light against the encroaching, absolute darkness and the penetrating cold that defined their existence. The smoke generated by this vital fire, thick and acrid, was largely left to find its own slow, meandering way out, either through a small rudimentary hole crudely fashioned in the roof directly above, or more commonly, by slowly and inefficiently dispersing through the inherently porous wattle and daub walls and the loose, breathable weave of the thatched roof. This was unequivocally not a system designed for comfort, for air quality, or for optimal thermal efficiency, but purely for fundamental survival, The fire itself and the fuel that sustained it was an inestimable, precious commodity, perhaps the most valuable possession a peasant family could hope to control, second only to their lives and their harvest. Fuel, primarily wood painstakingly gathered from the surrounding, often sparse and carefully managed forests, was collected with immense back-breaking effort and meticulously rationed with an almost religious devotion. Every single twig, every fallen branch, every scrap of kindling represented a vital, indispensable contribution to the flickering flame that stood as the sole fragile barrier between the family and the brutal, swift onset of hypothermia. The meager warmth radiating from this single, flickering fire was frequently the only source of heat available within the entire dwelling, compelling families to huddle incredibly close together, often in a tight, shared mass. In this configuration, they pooled their precious body heat, their faces illuminated by the dancing orange flames, their elongated, distorted shadows stretching like spectral figures across the crude, uneven, and smoke-stained walls. This shared intimacy around the hearth was not just for warmth, it fostered a psychological bond, a communal defense against the terrifying isolation of the cold. In the next chapter, you'll see how they ingeniously made that meager heat last through the interminable nights, long after the flames had died down. The peasants' ingenuity, born of constant necessity, extended far beyond the simple act of merely burning wood for immediate warmth. They possessed an intuitive, experiential understanding of the principle of thermal mass, even if they lacked the sophisticated scientific terminology to articulate such a concept. This deep practical knowledge, honed through generations of trial and error in the face of brutal winters, formed the fundamental basis of their sophisticated yet elegantly simple heat banking system, a vital innovation that allowed for prolonged warmth to permeate their dwellings throughout the frigid nights. This was not a system based on complex engineering, but rather on observation and the intelligent use of natural materials. A crucial technique involved the strategic placement of large, dense stones meticulously collected from nearby fields, riverbeds, or even discarded from older ruins, directly around the edges of the central fire. These stones, chosen for their size and ability to withstand intense heat without cracking, were positioned so they would absorb as much radiant heat as possible from the flames. Once thoroughly heated through, often to a scorching temperature, these stones would retain their warmth for many hours, slowly and consistently radiating a comforting, diffuse heat back into the dwelling long after the visible flames themselves had dwindled, reduced to embers, or died down completely for the night. This passive, continuous heat release was absolutely crucial for maintaining a tolerable, life-sustaining temperature through the long, dark and frigid hours when the fire was lower out. For the most vulnerable members of the family, such as young children or the elderly, a smaller, especially smooth stone might be carefully heated, then wrapped securely in a piece of thick cloth or animal hide, serving as a rudimentary but remarkably effective hot water bottle held close against the persistent, biting chill during sleep. This small comfort could make the difference between a restless, shivering night and one that allowed for vital, restorative sleep. Another remarkably cunning and equally vital technique involved the careful burial of hot coals in a shallow pit dug directly beneath the hearth. These glowing embers were then meticulously covered with a thick layer of ash, a calculated act designed to significantly slow their combustion to an almost imperceptible crawl. This method allowed a small, steady, and consistent amount of heat to be released over an extended period, often throughout the entire night, ensuring that the dwelling never became completely frigid and unbearable, even hours after the main fire had seemingly gone out. Come morning, with a bit of vigorous fanning to supply fresh oxygen to the buried embers, and the addition of a handful of dry kindling, these glowing coals could be revived with relative ease, reigniting a new fire without the arduous, time-consuming, and often frustrating process of starting one completely from scratch using flint and steel. This generational knowledge, passed down through whispers and hands-on demonstration, was paramount. A misjudgment, too much ash stifling the embers, or not enough air to keep them viable, could mean a cold start to a potentially deadly day, wasting precious time and effort. The medieval peasant's wardrobe was not a fleeting expression of fashion or personal preference, but rather a meticulously constructed, multi-layered defense system against the unforgiving elements that constantly threatened their very existence. Their comprehensive clothing and insulation protocol was born directly out of dire necessity, honed and refined over centuries of accumulated, hard-won wisdom, passed down through families as vital survival knowledge. The primary materials at their disposal were the humble yet remarkably effective wool and linen, each serving a distinct and absolutely crucial purpose in their thermal strategy. Wool, shorn directly from their own sheep or acquired through local trade, was undeniably coarse, often scratchy, and itchy against the skin, especially when new. However, its natural crimp, the crimped structure of its fibers, and its inherent scaly surface made it incredibly effective at trapping minute pockets of air, creating a vital, insulative layer of warmth that held heat close to the body. Crucially, wool possessed a remarkable property. It retained a significant portion of its insulating properties even when damp or wet, a profound and invaluable advantage in the perpetually damp, rainy, and often misty climate of medieval England, where staying dry was a constant challenge. Linen, derived from the versatile flax plant, was reserved for inner garments, providing a smoother, more comfortable layer directly against the skin. Its less irritating texture made it suitable for underclothing, and it also possessed some wicking properties, helping to draw away limited moisture from the body, though less effectively than modern fabrics. Layering was paramount. It was not just a suggestion, but the absolute cornerstone of their thermal management strategy. Multiple thin layers of clothing were understood, through lived experience, to be far more effective than a single thick one. Each individual layer trapped additional pockets of insulating air between them, creating multiple thermal barriers. This sophisticated understanding, intuitive rather than scientific, allowed for crucial adjustment as external conditions changed throughout the day and night. A peasant might shed an outer cloak during periods of strenuous labor and don it again when resting, providing a flexibility that a single bulky garment simply could not. Essential components of their daily attire included tunics of varying lengths, often belted at the waist, leggings for the lower body, sometimes cross-gartered, substantial cloaks for overarching protection against wind and rain, and various head coverings, from simple linen caps to more substantial woolen hoods. Hoods and mantles were particularly important for protecting the head and neck, areas where a significant amount of heat loss can occur due to the body's vascularity and the brain's need for stable temperature. These areas, if left exposed, could rapidly chill the entire body. The careful construction and daily application of these layered garments were not mere routine. They were a woven defense against hypothermia, a matter of life and death in every thread. Coming up, their surprisingly creative solution to the biggest daily obstacle they faced beyond clothing in the ceaseless fight against the winter's chill. In the harsh, unforgiving world of the medieval peasant, sleep was far from a comforting, restful escape from the relentless toil of daily life. Instead, it was a crucial strategic maneuver in the ongoing, merciless battle against the pervasive cold. The peasants' bedding and sleeping arrangements were not designed for individual comfort or aesthetic appeal. They were ingeniously crafted to maximize shared warmth and cunningly utilize every conceivable available resource, thereby blurring the lines between human comfort and essential animal necessity. Beds, as modern people conceive of them, elevated structures with sturdy frames, spring supports, and plush mattresses, were largely non-existent luxuries reserved for the wealthiest nobility. Most peasants slept on simple straw palliasse mattresses laid directly on the hard-packed earth floor, for those slightly more fortunate, on rudimentary wooden platforms raised just a few inches from the cold ground. These rudimentary mattresses, essentially large, coarsely woven sacks generously filled with fresh, dried straw, provided a crucial, albeit thin, layer of insulation, separating their bodies from the bone-chilling cold emanating directly from the ground beneath. Over these straw pallets, rough, scratchy wool blankets woven from their own sheep's fleece, or large, cured animal hides, often sheepskins or deerskins, were used as covers, providing additional, vital layers of warmth and a degree of protection against drafts. The collective effect of these simple materials was to create a personal cocoon, however rudimentary, against the biting night air. However, the single most effective and pervasive strategy for warmth retention during sleep was undoubtedly co-sleeping. The entire family unit, encompassing multiple generations from elderly grandparents to newborn infants, would routinely sleep huddled tightly together in a single communal mass. This was not an occasional practice, but a fundamental nightly ritual. Their collective body heat, emanating from so many close-packed forms, created a remarkable, albeit incredibly close quarters, microclimate of warmth that was exponentially more effective than any individual covering could possibly provide. This practice was not merely a matter of comfort or a demonstration of familial bonding. It was a fundamental, non-negotiable survival mechanism. The warmth generated by one body directly helped sustain and protect another, creating a powerful, symbiotic relationship essential for enduring the frigid nights when temperatures inside the dwelling could drop dangerously low. The closeness also offered a psychological comfort, a shared experience of hardship that fostered unity and mutual reliance. This human furnace, fueled by shared respiration and body heat, was often the most reliable source of warmth available to them throughout the long, dark hours. Beyond the direct human element, animals often played a surprisingly crucial and highly practical role in providing additional, vital warmth within the peasant dwelling, particularly during the most brutal winter nights. Young livestock such as calves, lambs, or even pigs, often the most vulnerable and easiest to manage, might be brought directly into the living space of the dwelling. Their large bodies, actively metabolizing food, radiated a significant and consistent amount of heat, substantially contributing to the ambient temperature within the crowded human and animal shared space. This practice was particularly common in regions where longhouses or byre dwellings were the predominant architectural styles. These structures were specifically designed to integrate human living quarters directly with animal stalls, the byre, under one continuous roof, creating a deliberate synergy between warmth generation and shelter. The thick stone or earthen walls separating the human and animal sections were often minimal, allowing heat to effectively transfer. This integration of animals into the domestic space was emphatically not a choice made for comfort, companionship, or sentimentality, as one might consider pets today. Rather, it was a stark, undeniable necessity, blurring the traditional lines between human habitation and animal husbandry. It represented a direct, pragmatic calculation of survival, uniting all living beings within the dwelling in a desperate common struggle against the encroaching, deadly frost. The inevitable stench from animal waste and unwashed bodies, the less than sanitary conditions, and the general discomfort of sharing close quarters with large animals were simply accepted as an unavoidable price of survival, an unpleasant but absolutely necessary trade-off for staying alive through the deep cold. Every living breath, every warm body, whether human or animal, was considered a valuable resource to be exploited in the desperate nightly pursuit of a morning thaw. The warmth radiating from a cow's flank or a pig's body could be the difference between a child surviving the night or succumbing to hypothermia. Winter was not just a season, it was the ultimate brutal test of a family's foresight, their capacity for meticulous, long-term planning, and the stark, uncompromising reality of medieval food and fuel logistics. The harvest season, stretching from late summer into autumn, was a frenetic, back-breaking race against time, a desperate scramble to gather, process, and store enough provisions to simply survive through the lean, barren months that inevitably followed. Scarcity was the defining, ever-present characteristic of winter life, dictating every action, every decision, and every allocation of resources. Food, primarily coarse grain destined for the daily baking of dense, often hard bread, was supplemented by hearty root vegetables like turnips, parsnips, and carrots, which could withstand storage. Carefully dried meat, often from autumn slaughtering, and some limited preserved dairy products like hard cheese provided crucial protein and fat. Every single crumb, every precious morsel was accounted for and consumed with an acute, almost painful awareness of its finite, diminishing supply. There was no room for waste, no margin for error. The very concept of plenty vanished with the first heavy snow. Storage methods, while rudimentary by modern standards, were absolutely vital for preventing spoilage, loss to pests, or theft. Grain, the very lifeblood of their diet and the foundation of their caloric intake, was stored in dry, cool places, often in robust earthenware pots. Woven baskets lined with clay or sturdy wooden chests, specifically designed to protect it from the twin, ever-present threats of gnawing rodents and insidious dampness that could quickly render an entire season's yield inedible. Root vegetables were frequently buried in earth clamps, insulated pits in the ground covered with straw and soil, or stored in cool, dark cellars, further insulated by layers of straw to prevent freezing. Meat was rigorously salted, smoked over slow-burning fires, or dried in the open air to prevent putrefaction and extend its shelf life as long as humanly possible. These methods were far from foolproof. Spoilage from unexpected moisture, widespread infestations by insects or rodents, and outright theft from desperate individuals were constant threats, any of which could plunge a family into swift and agonizing starvation. Fuel, predominantly gathered wood and sometimes precious dried animal dung, was equally, if not more, precious than food itself in the fight against the cold. Gathering it was an arduous, dangerous task, often involving perilous treks into snow-covered, frozen forests, where the risk of injury, getting lost in a blizzard, or encountering dangerous wild animals like wolves was terrifyingly high. Every piece of gathered wood was stacked with meticulous care, seasoned for months to maximize its caloric output, and then burned with the utmost efficiency within the dwelling's central hearth. A fire that burned too hot, too quickly, or for too long was considered a profligate, unforgivable waste of life-sustaining warmth. The entire cyclical rhythm of medieval peasant life in winter was absolutely dictated by the precarious, day-to-day availability of these two fundamental resources: food to fuel their bodies and fuel to warm their homes. Their absence, even in seemingly small quantities, meant certain agonizing death by cold or starvation. Beyond the tangible tools and rudimentary techniques, beyond the wattle and daub, the rough wool, and the stored grain, the medieval peasant's greatest, most profound asset in enduring the relentless grip of winter was their intrinsic mindset of endurance. This was not merely stubbornness or blind optimism, but a profound resilience forged in generations of unrelenting hardship, a mental fortitude tempered by the ceaseless, unforgiving demands of survival against overwhelming odds. Community was absolutely paramount. It was the bedrock upon which their collective survival rested. While individual families huddled tightly within the fragile confines of their homes, the wider village structure offered a crucial, albeit fragile, safety net. Neighbors, bound by shared struggles and mutual dependence, extended aid whenever humanly possible, sharing meager resources during periods of extreme scarcity, offering comfort and practical help to the sick or struggling, and collaborating on larger, essential tasks like clearing snow-blocked paths between dwellings or repairing damaged communal buildings. Despite the profound sense of isolation that individual families might experience within their cold homes, this isolation was never truly absolute within the tight-knit village bounds. Faith provided a deep wellspring of solace and offered a crucial, perhaps even indispensable framework for understanding and perhaps even accepting the relentless, often capricious forces of nature that govern their lives. Prayers for mild winters, for the blessings of a successful harvest, and for the health and well-being of their cherished families were not mere perfunctory rituals, but deeply ingrained, heartfelt supplications that permeated every aspect of their daily lives. The local church, often the most substantial and enduring building in the village, served as a vital communal space, offering a brief, precious respite from the frigid confines of their humble homes. It was a place for shared worship, for gathering warmth from the collective presence of others, and for nurturing a shared sense of hope against despair. Crucially, generational knowledge was the invisible, yet incredibly strong thread that held their very survival together. There were no printed textbooks, no elaborate instruction manuals, no scientific treatises on winter survival. Instead, every single technique, every hard-won strategy for enduring the cold, Every subtle nuance of predicting unpredictable weather patterns, and every intricate method of preserving precious food was passed down orally through direct observation, meticulous imitation, and intense lived experience from one generation to the next. The wisdom of elders was not just respected, but profoundly revered, for their very existence into old age was a living, breathing testament to their unparalleled mastery of survival in a world that offered no second chances. A single poor harvest, an unexpectedly brutal, prolonged frost, or a critical, unforgivable mistake in judgment could lead to catastrophic, irreversible consequences, plunging an entire family or even a village into starvation or exposure. The stakes were always, unflinchingly, life or death, imbuing every decision, every action, with a primal, visceral intensity. The constant looming threat of winter stripped away all pretense, all comfort, all superfluous aspects of life, leaving only the raw, unvarnished, tenacious will to live as their ultimate defining characteristic. We stand today in a world of abundant warmth, often insulated from the raw fury of winter by central heating and sophisticated infrastructure. But what can we truly learn from these lost techniques, from the silent, arduous struggles of the English medieval peasant? We learn of a resilience born of absolute necessity, of an ingenuity honed by relentless desperation. We see the profound, undeniable importance of community when facing seemingly insurmountable odds, the invaluable strength of shared knowledge, and the vital, humbling role of respecting the raw power of the natural world. It was a life lived on the very edge, where every dawn was a victory. Their reliance on deep-seated ancestral wisdom, passed down through generations, was paramount. Every fiber of their being, every daily chore, was a direct response to the land's demands, forging an unbreakable bond with their environment and fellow villagers. This intimate connection, often unseen in our modern world, truly underpinned their remarkable endurance. What aspects of medieval survival would you like to see explored in future videos? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this journey into the past insightful, please subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives.